YouTube, welcome back to the Jaded Weeb channel. I've been gone for a couple weeks. I was at a con for a little bit and then I got sick for a little bit and my throat's not doing too good. Still kind of isn't, but you know, that's what we're here for. And yeah, I was at a con, so I got myself some new shirts, that kind of thing. This one in particular is a Spy Family shirt, which is really nice. But that being said, I haven't managed to catch up with Isekai Yakkyoku. I haven't watched the last two episodes. I kind of got through the one where they started quarantining all the ships and things like that, and I was going to do a reaction to that before I got really busy. And Japan has now opened up, so that's rearranged some of my plans, and I might release some other videos instead of what I was planning on doing, more about kind of tourism in Japan and things like that. More guides and things like that than necessarily anime type content. But I figured I might as well try and at least finish out the series. I'll probably go back and do the last two episodes that I missed out within the next week or so, just to, you know, make it all complete and nice, so it all fits into a playlist for you. So I've kind of got an idea of what's happening story-wise, but I'm not 100% sure. So if I do make any mistakes about the story, let me know. But as always, I'm here mainly for, you know, comparing his fantasy tactics compared to what we might do kind of in the real world. And it looks like someone's been weaponizing the Black Death. So we'll see how he decides to enforce containment and enforce quarantine like he's originally tried to be doing within the last few episodes. So we'll get started.
Nanda, 警鐘なら聞こえておるぞ。
ネデールの聖騎士が攻め込んできたとのことです。
聖騎士、兵力は
5名です。
5名？たった？その程度、さっさとひねり潰せばよかろう。
陛下、ネデールといえば報告にあった密入国の正体、黒死病が帝都に持ち込まれたと見るべきです。陛下。
So this kind of biological warfare obviously does not come under Pharmacist purview. That is for the defense ministry or government agency, whatever you want to call it, to deal with. And obviously, depending where you live, different governments will have different contingency plans for such events. There hasn't really been any recently, at least in terms of like biological illnesses, you know, bacteria, viruses, that kind of thing. So I mean, it's not something we really prepare for, and it's what a lot of people, a lot of countries thought this wouldn't really happen anymore. That's kind of why a lot of the pandemic planning kind of went out the window, because we thought we were kind of done with that. And obviously in the last couple of years, that has proven to not be the case. And we do need to be able to effectively combat such diseases that, you know, spread really quickly. So, yeah, I don't think anyone nowadays would really use this type of tactic in a military context, only because it's so likely to backfire on you. So if it rages through, you know, your opponent's population from a purely you know, theoretical, cold, level-headed, mathematical purview, right? You release this, you know, weapon amongst your opponent's populace, they all catch it and start, you know, contracting illness, that kind of thing. The problem is that your own forces are probably likely to also be susceptible to it. And even if you have developed your own vaccine or whatever to it, that kind of research and knowledge takes a long time to be able to build up. And if you're instead trying to piggyback off, you know, a well-known vector, then the likelihood that your enemy also has the ability to defend themselves with their own vaccines, that kind of thing, is quite high, at least nowadays. So I don't think from a purely strategic point of view, even though I have no military background pretty much, I don't think it would ever get used. And it's only in these kinds of cases where international travel in this fantasy world is obviously quite limited, where such a attack would be, even viable.
他には後ほど黒死病の新薬の予防服薬を始めていただきます。
しかしわからぬの。
ん？
ネデールの意図じゃ。かの国は我が帝国と同盟を結んで久しい。
Alright, lots of politics. I'll see if I can find another spot for more pharmacy related stuff.
同盟破棄の通告。
Okay, this looks promising.
検疫所は突破されたか。
So he's scouting for how far the plague has already spread.
はどこまで拡散している。青い光、感染が成立している。あ、なんだあれ。
Yeah, so it's in the rodents, that kind of thing.
あれはリスじゃない、モモンガじゃないか。あんなの空を飛ぶ分、リスより厄介だぞ。
Okay, so in terms of infection control, the classic case that a lot of people get taught in epidemiology is cholera in London. I can't remember the exact name of the dude, but essentially he was the first one that really proved how diseases kind of travel, and that it wasn't necessarily like bad air or humors or things like that, that there was a way you could effectively track a disease through a population. And the way he did it in London was he tracked the illnesses amongst households that were close by to various wells. So by wells, I mean like water wells. They drawing water up for drinking, bathing, that kind of, general household usage. And by consuming this contaminated water, these people would contract cholera. So by tracking who got sick when and where, he was able to therefore effectively track how cholera was spreading and be able to pinpoint, okay, it must be through the water supply, and therefore be able to preempt exactly how the cholera was traveling and therefore stop the infection. Now, obviously, Pharma has magical abilities, and he already has some foreknowledge about Black Death and that it can spread mostly through rodents. So he's already, kind of got a head start on our poor English epidemiologist. But the techniques are effectively the same in that you are trying to track who gets sick when and where, and therefore be able to effectively cordon off portions of the population to protect them from the others to stamp out the infection. Hopefully he comes up with a better plan than just trying to isolate portions of the population, because as he said, the flying squirrels are going to make things a lot harder for him. He's obviously got all his PP up. Personal protective equipment up.
アルマか。よくぞ戻った。マーセイルはどうした？
エレオノール先生に任せてきたので問題ありません。それより。
All right, more politics, more dudes, more story. So I won't dwell on that for too much. We'll move on from here. Okay, so we are against the main bad guy, I assume. He's trying to spread Black Death all amongst the world because he's a little bit of a, bad guy is probably the most nice way I would put it. So he's trying to spread Black Death, and he has infected, I think, Farmer's friends with a little bit of toxins, a little bit of toxicity going on. So we'll see what Farmer identifies and compare that to how, we would probably treat that in a real life situation.
アルカロイド。この世界で入手しやすい速攻性の猛毒。トリカブトか。 箱にチン
So he's identified one,
箱にチンを消去
and he can just do that, of course, because, you know,
複数の毒
pharmacist and all
まだあ
that.
るのか
We can do that,
テ
obviously.
トロドトキシンサキシトキシンパリトキシンアマニチンバトラコトキシン嘘だろバトラコトキシンを消去まさかヤ毒とは
All right. So he basically listed off a whole bunch of different toxic mushrooms. These are all toxins that you can basically get if you ingest, you know, different funguses and you don't know what you're doing. Or fungi. Fungi instead of funguses. Because, you know, they're pretty easy to obtain in a fantasy world, as he correctly identified. There's others that may be like arsenic or hemlock, but hemlock's even a herb. So he was basically trying to go through in his head, you know, all these plant or fungal-based poisons, which is kind of the right thing to do. Now, obviously, in the real world, we unfortunately do not have the hand-wavy effect where we can just determine what poison people. But there's a few things in general that you can do within quick succession if you realize that they have ingested something poisonous. There's a couple things that generally work for most poisons or ingested poisons. And then you can worry about more specific treatments. So the main two things are basically stomach pumping. If you can get it out of their stomach before it really takes effect, all the better. You know, just chuck a pipe down the windpipe and blah, you know, force them to regurgitate it out or vacuum it out, as the case may be. So stomach pumping, and also activated charcoal or activated carbon is another way of putting it, I think. Where essentially the activated carbon that you kind of put in their stomach, because obviously the person is probably comatose, probably doesn't feel like eating very much, although you can put it in pills, I think. But essentially it sits in their stomach and it kind of absorbs all of the kind of stomach acid as well as all the poison, the toxins, that kind of thing, into it, and then it passes harmlessly out of the patient. And those are two things that basically work against most toxins that are ingestible. If not, then you've obviously got a more serious case on your hands. But those two things are basically like your go-to first aid steps once they get into a hospital. If you notice someone that has already ingested something that is poisonous, there's unfortunately not much you can do as from a first aid point of view. If you can get them to like bring it back up to regurgitate it, that's obviously better, because the faster you do it, the better. But more often than not, they'll only realize, you know, several hours after ingestion, in which case multiple, like the activated charcoal, the stomach pumping, etc., probably won't work anyway. And in that case, you kind of have to identify, you know, what what poison they ingested, and therefore what's the best treatment for them and what's the best antidote if you have it. So yeah, in this case, obviously Farmer can just, you know, wave his hand and, you know, remove whatever toxin once he identifies it correctly. But essentially he just ran through a whole bunch of plant-based poisons to try to find the correct one. We'll see if the bad guy talks more about his philosophy, because that might be something, you know, interesting. Here we go. Ill people on their way to death are beautiful. So there's been a lot of scientists throughout history that have kind of stopped at nothing in order to further scientific knowledge. And while some may think that that cause is noble, obviously it comes to the detriment of their fellow humans. So, you know, this kind of statistic way of thinking is not a great way of furthering human knowledge, especially when we have the technology to be able to avoid it pretty much most of the time. Or if we can't avoid it, we know it's because we have no more options left, and therefore, you know, any option's better than none. And this is, you know, really taken into consideration, especially for clinical research, that kind of thing, where we make sure that the patient or the subject, whatever way you want to call it, you know, is informed about the risks and the benefits of this of a particular clinical trial, and therefore is making the best decision for them for their own healthcare. Because no matter what, we want to make sure that people get better and that we provide a good service to the world, that we help people eventually. Gone are the days where purely for money making exercise, right? Thalidomide is the classic example where the indication came before the safety testing, right? The morning after pill, not the morning after pill, sorry, the pill for morning sickness, sorry, not the morning after pill, the pill for morning sickness in pregnancy. That's what thalidomide was marketed for, because they just thought of the indication before they really tried any of the safety issues, really tested it to make sure that it was safe, and lo and behold, you get the thalidomide tragedy in the 1960s and 70s. If you don't know what the thalidomide tragedy was, essentially can't remember what nationality it was, but essentially the guy found this compound and he was trying to find like indications for it. Like, he wasn't really testing it to see what safety profile it kind of had. He just wanted to try and market it and make a quick buck. In which case he stumbled upon, it worked out for sort of hangover type symptoms, sort of like morning sickness problems in pregnant women. So he just kind of went with that, and it worked. It worked, but also induced congenital defects in the ladies, in the women's children once they were born, in their babies. And it was because of that lack of stringent regulation around clinical trials and testing that caused the whole kind of structure of clinical trials to essentially, come into being almost. Since then, it's involved a lot more to make sure that clinical trials are safe and efficacious and work for the majority of people, and that we can always glean the best data from those clinical trials while putting the patients at the least risk where possible. So yeah, this kind of sick mindset isn't really done nowadays, thank God. But there's probably always going to be some people who just don't have those kinds of empathetic bones in their bodies, unfortunately. And of course, this guy's meant to be a bad guy, so he's meant to be like this.
衰弱と絶望と死、そして病に耐えた少数の勝者による再生への営みは人類をよりしたたかにする。そこに生命の美しさ、その真髄があるのだ。この実験室は素晴らしい。未知の毒物がこんなにもある。
Yes, so when he mentions unknown poisons, obviously any medicine is a poison when taken in the wrong quantity or in the wrong dose. So, I mean, this guy is pretty much just saying, look at all this, crazy stuff you have. This is things that I could never have dreamt of. And I want to, use it on people in the wrong dosages. So, what a dude.
また一つ人類が進歩するぞ。実験の開始だ。
白輪消去。
Oh yeah, no, he can do this. No, I remember. So at the beginning, he can make and destroy matter, pretty much, right? He can eliminate matter just by thinking about the molecular structure or anything. Yeah. Okay, I remember now. Yeah.
そういうのは実験とは言わないんだよ。無理だ。お前だけは。お前は治せない。
フォルム様、すごく怒ってる。なんだかとっても悲しそう。
だったらどうする？
Oh, what a punch! What a dude!
なぜわからぬ。それほどの力を持ちながらなぜ私の思想が理解できぬのだ。お前も私と同じ真理の探求 者のはずだ。
All right, so the rest of this is like, you know, all the proselytizing about, you know, seekers of truth and checking about, you know, what truth means and who really deserves knowledge and things like that. I won't get into that. That's not really philosophy for me. I think overall this series has been, you know, pretty interesting. I personally am not a big fan of isekai, so I think that's why towards the end of this is kind of washing over me a little bit. I think it's pretty good, but I'm not an isekai aficionado. So I personally would not really watch this again. The science bits of it were good. I enjoyed those. They were fairly accurate. And the interesting comparisons between, you know, real life and what fantasy can come up with are always pretty interesting to contrast and compare. So I hope you guys found that interesting. From me, obviously now with the series to an end, I'll probably finish off the last 2 episodes. So episode 10 and 11 that I missed before. I'll start putting out some more tourism vids because Japan just opened up from October 11. Visa-free countries that used to be able to visit Japan without a visa can go again. So I'll be, you know, doing some more stuff on that. If you would like to see that, make sure you hit the subscribe button. And if you want to see me kind of maybe touch on some other anime series that maybe have a little bit more of a scientific bent to them, you know, I can give those a whack. Just leave me a comment down below. But otherwise, thanks for watching, guys. I'll catch you around next time.